I've compiled my top outdoor woodworking projects into one single video. I'm going to show you how to build each one, and I'm going to give you some tips and tricks and mistakes to avoid when you finish those projects to make them last longer outdoors, because there's some woods you should use, there's some finishes you should use to make sure they last. Let's go. If you're interested in any of these outdoor projects, there are full build plans available, as well as a bundled plan where you can get all of them in one single bundle for a discounted rate. Link in the description, pinned comment for all the tools and supplies and plans. Let's build something. So the first thing I gotta do is cut out the frame for both the long side and the short side of this DIY sectional. And so I'm gonna be using common 2x6 pine here, and I'm gonna cut 2 pieces at 77 inches long, 8 pieces 21 3/4, and then also 2 pieces at 39 inches, and that will make up both frames. So I'm using the Maska Products M2 pocket hole jig. It's easily adjustable, so we're gonna do 1.5 inch stock because that's what a common 2x6 is. You just set 1.5 inches there. We'll set our depth of our bit we want drilled with this guide. So a lot of times if you're drilling pocket holes, you'll notice that sometimes they'll bust through if you've drilled too much into your hole. So what I like to do is I'll actually back this off maybe 1/8 inch. That helps out a lot. Now it's time to assemble both frames. I'm using Titebond 2 wood glue. Make sure you spread ample amounts here, and then also 2 pocket hole screws on each side. I put each end on first, then I equally space the center supports. This is going to keep everything nice and stable as well as square. Once the long frame's done, do the short frame the exact same way. And using clamps here will help keep everything from moving on you. So we got both frames built. Now we're going to put some decking on there. I'm just going to use 1x6s because they're lighter weight and they're a little less expensive than a 2x6 right now. Trying to keep this as low cost as possible. So I'm just going to cut 4 1x6s, the length of this frame here to the exact length, which is 77 inches, I believe. Cut 4 of those, and we'll put a gap in between each one, just space them equally so that water can drain out and it's not holding water. So we got our basic frame built. Now we're going to build the legs, and I'm going to cut 4 26.5 inch pieces for the uprights, and there'll be a piece on top. It'll make a total of 28 inches tall. Let's build some legs. So now I'm just assembling the legs, and this is the upright of the leg, and this will be the second upright of the leg on the other side. Of course, the top here is your armrest. I like to assemble everything upside down. I got it clamped in place, I got it glued, and then we'll just put you make sure you're using outdoor screws here. Main thing here is you want to make sure the front face is flush. And one good tip is to go ahead and start both screws, and that'll kind of hold everything in place. Even though you do have a clamp, sometimes that pocket hole tends to throw everything off if you don't have both of them already started. This is the leg assembly. The sectional will actually attach to this side because this is actually the leg assembly will sit like this. Your frame assembly is heavy. Your frame assembly will actually come in here like this, and those pocket holes will be covered, and that's why you turn them that way. We'll actually mount the top of the frame will be at 17 inches here. And full disclosure, you won't have to worry about this because I've already corrected this in the plans that I'm making. This is the back board. I'm going to take it off and make a longer board because that's actually going to come together like that. And then I'm going to take this board off. Actually, what happened was I forgot that there needed to be legs back here on this back side. So I made a mistake. But it wasn't too late to fix it, so that's a great thing. We're going to put the legs on right here. It's going to be similar to the other style leg, except for it's going to come to here, and then we'll take this board and extend it all the way across for the back to lay on. You'll see what I mean when we get to the back. So this is the short side of the sectional. I've got it standing up here so I can get my measurement. So I'm building the short leg for the back, and I know that I'm going to need it to come to the same as this is. So it's 16 1/4 from the bottom of the leg up to the top of this 2x6 frame. And I'm going to build this the same to go on that back corner because there will be a 1x on top to make it 17 total, which is what this will be when we have our 1x on top like that. So the 1x will actually go all the way by this and onto the top of this. And for the short leg, you're just going to make sure to put this support in there up next to the top of the support so that you'll have something to attach the frame to. So we're going to start assembling the sectional now, and so this is going to be what's going to be your armrest up top. We want our seat height here at 17 inches because our cushions were going to go on there like that. They're about 4 inches thick, but when you sit on them, they squish pretty good down to about an inch. That'll give us about an 18-inch seat height, give or take. I'm going to glue this on and screw it because it's going to be outside, and it'll take care. If you glue your joints together, it'll take care of any squeaking and all that good stuff. Wet glue. I have to drop this. Oof. Struggle is real. The struggle is real. Again, these are exterior screws. Make sure you're using exterior screws or they'll rust and cause problems later. Probably better pre-drill that. Last thing we want to happen here is to go ahead and have a board split because we didn't pre-drill our holes. Before I get too much further along, I'm going to take my router. I've got a white side chamfer bit. It's a 45-degree chamfer bit. I'm going to chamfer the bottom of these legs and then also the top of these armrests so that it doesn't hurt your arm. And on the bottom of the legs, it's so that they don't split and bust. If you just leave them square, then they have a tendency to chip off and stuff. If you don't have a router, just take your sander and sand that over until you get kind of a rounded edge. That's what I'm doing now. All right, all right, all right. So this is the short side. I'm putting glue here where this short leg is going to be attached. And again, if you just want to screw it together, you can, but it's going to keep it from squeaking and stuff later as the wood expands and contracts in this weather. Even if you've got it stained like we're going to, it's a great idea to go ahead and put glue on this thing. So I went ahead and rounded over those bottoms of this leg too. We're just going to set this in there. The main thing you're looking for here is you want to make sure this top side is flush and this back side is flush. We'll just screw that in. Is this right? Yeah. So now you see that this piece will actually come in there and it'll attach here underneath, and then we'll have our leg on the other end. And then that 1x run right across the top there. It's like 63 3/4. Yep. So you can really see it starting to come together now. Now I did not glue these down because if they ever become, because for one, they're 1x's and they may weather less well than the 2x material. So I want to be able to take these up and replace them if needed. So I didn't glue these down, but I am screwing them at 2 per intersection there. Now we're cooking. Now we're going to put this on. This is the leg on the long section, and we're going to do it just like we did the other one. We want the top at 17 inches from the bottom of the leg. Yep, get up there. So it's actually 10 3/4 of an inch to the bottom, and then we'll attach that with glue and screws as well. I'm going to take measure. So I kind of messed up. I wasn't thinking and drilled these 2 holes on the outside when they're actually supposed to go on the inside, so don't do that. I'm going to stick 2 screws in there to cover the holes up. All right, so right before we start building the back, so we're building an angle back, and we want to go ahead and join this together, even though it's going to be extremely hard to move. If you're building this as a modular piece, you would leave these separate at this point, and then you could go ahead and build your backs and just have it to where the backs would attach to the base separately. So what we're going to do is I'm going to glue and screw from this sideboard into this, and then from this piece into this, which is why we built this piece like this. There's legs on the back side to support the back. The middle right here in this corner shouldn't need a leg because it's all tied together. Now if you're not tying this together and you want to make this 2-piece, you can certainly do that. All you would need to do is put a leg right here on the corner and a leg under this, and it would be a 2-piece, and you can move them separately. But we're going to build a 1-piece because we don't want it to move separately. So I'm working on the back pieces now, or the back angles. You should have some drops from earlier cuts on this stuff. You can use those. So this is a 7-degree angle, and this is a 10-degree angle. You can see that there's a little bit of difference there. This is fairly straight up. This is leaning back a little more. I think 10 degrees will be a more comfortable angle. And so we're going to go at 10 degrees. These are 17.5 inches tall. So if you don't have a miter saw and you still want those 10-degree angles, you can use a speed square to get the same angle and mark it, and then cut it with a circular saw. Just be real cautious about getting that angle correct. But you can do it with a speed square and a circular saw if you don't have a miter saw. So now it's time to start putting the backs on. We got the 10-degree angle on the top and the bottom, and then we're going to put a top piece around the top to protect that end grain. It'll help it last longer and it'll look better. And we're just going to set these on there on these pieces that are on the edges where the armrests are. Just going to screw into the armrest from the side, and that'll secure it there. No need to secure it anywhere else. One here, one on the corner, one in the middle, one on the end. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the ones out here in the center will be pocket hole down into the structure. So just to show you, I'm 200 pounds. This corner is very robust, so you don't have to worry about it. If you've put it together this way, you don't have to have that leg sticking in here. Kind of takes away from the look of it. So before I start putting the backs on, I'm going to go ahead and take this opportunity to sand all of this. I'm going to do 80 grit and then 120 grit, and that's it. And then I'm just going to kind of knock the edges off. I'll probably take my chamfer bit here on these edges and hit these edges all the way around just to give it a little more detail. You don't have to do that. You can just hit it with the sander and just kind of knock that rough edge off. Once the cushion's on there, your leg shouldn't be touching that anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and drill some pocket holes in the top. So this is actually turned upside down. This is the top of my back rail. I'm going to put one pocket hole here, one here, and that's to screw that top face piece on with. And then some of them will have pocket holes on the bottom. A couple of them will, and then the rest of them will be, or the two end pieces won't have it on the bottom. And I went ahead and sanded all these as well, just to make things easier. So now we're going to go ahead and put the back on. These are cut at 10-degree angles. The ones that are attached to the arms on each side will have pocket holes going up into the top, but none in the bottom because we're going to attach it to the arm itself. And then on the corners, they'll have pocket holes in the top and the bottom. And then we'll have one in the middle on the long side. Make sure that this backboard is even with this back slat so that if it's too far forward, then your cushions won't fit. We better test those first. Perfecto, she says. So now it's time, we're going to go ahead and put the top piece on to cap off these end grains. If you leave that end grain exposed like that, it's just going to soak up water. So I want to cap it with this top board. I went ahead and drilled 2 pocket holes in one of these 45 miters, and what that's going to do is when we get it up there, you'll be able to attach these two so they don't flex over time because they're just kind of standing out there over by themselves. And then we'll attach from underneath the pocket holes up into these top face boards there. So I want to make sure it's flush with the front side of this, and then you just want to make sure your corners are lining up before you attach everything. And now that I know everything's going to line up, I can go ahead and attach it. I got my top rail on. It's on there, pocket hole, glued and screwed, man. That's a good place to rest your arm. It's at a good height to rest your arm. I'm 5'11". We're going to put the back rails on now to help support those back cushions. And they're just going to be 2x6s as well all the way around. Just going to run 2 of them spaced equally. And then we'll pocket hole them in there. And then we'll be ready for stain right after we sand it. But first I'm going to run a chamfer bit around this top piece so that it matches all the side pieces. So for the pocket holes that are facing down, you want to make sure you fill those with I like to use a 3/8 inch dowel. You can buy pocket hole plugs if you don't want to cut these, but I usually cut about a 2-inch piece off, put glue on there. So that's going to prevent water from getting down in there and just standing. So I just drive those in there until you hear it bottom out, and then you just let that glue dry for 30, 45 minutes, whatever it takes, and then I'll just take this flush trim saw, cut it off smooth, and then we'll sand everything else so that it's plugged. And I'm gonna plug those also just for aesthetics. Now it's time to put the back supports on to support those cushions. And these are just pocket holed in from the back. I used a scrap piece of 2x to space them out from the bottom of the bench and also between the two boards themselves. And then we come back and fill those pocket holes with the same dowel method as before. This thing is a beast to move. It took 5 of us to get it to the backyard to get it ready for the staining. I've got the whole thing assembled and sanded. Now it's time to stain it or put an oil on it. This is Australian timber oil from Cabot. It's a Jahara brown color that we're going to be using. It's made for outdoor furniture, and this is what's going to help protect it from the elements as much as possible. And I'm using my HomeRite Finish Max sprayer. It's a very cheap, inexpensive sprayer for about $100. Spray whatever you want with it, whether it be oil-based or even water-based. And I just put 1 coat of this Australian oil on there. Just be careful not to spray it too thick because it will run. Once it's sprayed on there, we let this dry for 24 hours before we moved it onto the deck. Surprisingly, with a lot of effort, 4 of us was able to get it onto the deck. I'm gonna show you how to build this beautiful outdoor bench. You can make it with common lumber that you find at your local home store. Very easy joinery methods. Anybody can build this with just a few basic tools. If you're interested in building one of these for yourself, I have plans available linked in the description and the pinned comment. Let's go. I purchased my lumber locally from a place called Barton's and another place called Allied here in Monticello, Arkansas. And why I like using them versus big box store lumber is because I can get #1 grade 2x, like 2x6s, as well as 2x4s, appearance grade, basically #1 1x. It makes the projects look better, and there's less knots as well as splits and things like that. If you saw my 99% of beginners don't know how to store lumber video, then you know that we need to let this acclimate for a couple of days in the shop before we start building with it, if at all possible. Sometimes that's not possible, but if it is best to let this stuff acclimate to your environment. I picked out the straightest boards for the longer pieces, and then any that are going to be shorter, then I can use some of the more bent or bowed boards because you're going to take small chunks out of it. It won't matter as much. First thing we're going to do for this bench, I said bench, B-E-N-C-H, we're going to cut out the seat frame, where the seat's going to go. First thing you want to do is square up this end of the 2x4 before you start cutting it to length. That way you get everything nice and square starting off. Typically when I have 2 boards the same length, I'm going to line up one end to make sure it's perfectly flush, and then I'll line it up on the other end where the blade is going to cut. That way I'll get 2 exact pieces. Especially if you don't have stop blocks or it's longer than your stop block setup, such as here. Pocket hole time. Now we're going to pocket hole this thing together. I like pocket holes because they're strong and they're easy, and you don't have screws sticking everywhere. There's going to be enough in this project as it is, so the frame's just going to be pocket hole together. This is basically set up like it's going to be. All of your seat slats will go on top of this. This bench is going outside, so you want to make sure to use coated screws like these blue ones. That way they don't rust. I'm going to be using wood glue and pocket holes here to join all these together. On the 2 outside pieces, I'm going to turn the pocket holes to the inside. While it's not ideal, just for strength-wise, it's really not going to be that load-bearing on those ends. So I'm going to go ahead and turn those on the inside so you don't see the pocket holes from the outside. On the inside braces, it doesn't matter. Once I got everything lined up, I'm just going to drive the screws into the boards. You'll want to use some type of clamp here to hold everything together so it doesn't move while you drive those screws. Now we're going to install the center braces. All you want to do is center these up in between this frame here. Just going to make sure the tops are flush and it's square up and down. That way everything just kind of fits together better. Next thing I'm gonna do is cut out 4 legs. I'm gonna cut these at 23¼ inches long. Now I'm gonna set my seat height at 16 inches. It's a little shorter than I usually do at 18 inches, but if you put seat cushions on here, then it always puts it a little bit too tall. So if you're a taller person or you're building this for a taller person, you may want to extend these legs up a couple of inches so that you can set your seat height accordingly. Next thing I'm gonna do is drill pocket holes in the aprons for the legs. In other words, the cross piece that goes across the top of the legs. Next, we're going to assemble our leg assemblies. Super easy. You're gonna have 2 pocket holes per side. Use a face clamp or something to basically keep these pieces in line, nice and flush, and then drive the pocket hole screws. If your cuts are good 90 degrees, you shouldn't have any issues with everything lining up. Again, make sure you're using outdoor screws. Now this part's optional. I'm going to plug these pocket holes with a 3/8 inch dowel. They also sell pocket hole plugs. There's a couple of reasons you want to do this. One, aesthetics, because it's going to look better once it's finished and you won't have holes in the armrest. Another reason you want to do this is to protect it from water getting in there and things like that while it's outside. Now we're going to cut our back supports. You're only going to actually need about a little over 6 foot of 2x6. So if you need just to buy just 1 8-footer and you'll have a 2-foot piece left over, you can do that. We're gonna cut 2 pieces at 18 inches starting out. So to create an angled back, all we're gonna do is basically we're gonna keep 1.5 inches on the top. We'll measure up, say 4.5, 4.25 from the bottom. Then we'll connect those 2 lines and then we'll cut that piece off and that will give our angled back. To cut that angle, you can use a jigsaw, or if you have a table saw with a tapering jig such as this, if you saw that video where I made this, it's super easy to do on there. After cutting the angles on the seat supports, I'm going to cut 2 2x4s out, the equal lengths. These are 47 inches long. And we're going to drill pocket holes in those, and that's going to support our seat back slats. During this project, I've been using the 3M dust extractor, and I do like that they have the step-down dust adapter that fits into most ports, like on the Maska pocket hole jig. So this seat support, or the back slat support, needs to be flush with this angle, and it'll be flush with the top. Now you will have a little bit of an angle up the top that's not matching the crossboard, but you can trim that off later if you want. Now the easiest way to do that, instead of trying to hold this in the air and get it right, is just to flip this over, put the pocket holes on the back. Then you'll just line up that top corner with this corner, and because it's on a flat surface, it'll all line up on the other side and screw these in place. Now we're going to put the middle brace on the back, and I'm just going to measure down 4 inches from the top board between the two. So inside and inside measurements, and screw this in place with pocket holes and glue. Now this is what your seat back frame should look like. We get these front pieces lined up with that angle, and then we'll attach the slats and then we'll put it on the frame. Still got a little bit of work to do, but it's looking good. For the back slats, I use 1x4s, and I cut 14 of them out at the exact same length, or as close to the same length as I can get it. Now to install the seat back slats, what I'm going to do, or what I have done, is I've just set this back frame down inside this frame because that's where it will be mounted whenever we're ready to mount it, which we're not yet. And then I'm just going to take 2 of my seat slats that I will be using later. These are just 1x6s. We're going to stack those on top of this frame, and we're going to use that as a spacer. It'll make it a lot easier. And then what we're going to do is start spacing these out and screwing them into the back supports. To make sure I get all my screws exactly right all the way across, I'm going to just measure up from here, look at the center of the boards. We're looking at about 4.25. Again, we're not building a clock, so it doesn't have to be exact. And then also 12 up here. So we'll just measure from the bottom up on all these, 4.25 and 12, pre-drill some holes, and then we'll attach them. So it'd be much easier if I just take a countersink bit like this, make one that's the template, just set them on top of the next one, and then I can just basically make a pilot hole and then countersink drill through there. If you line everything up, bottom and top, side to side, everything should match when we start putting them up there. For the first back slat, I'm going to round over or round the corner using a flush trim bit with the Craig radius jig. If you don't have this, you can certainly just use a sander or even a jigsaw. We'll do this on both ends. For the first back slat, we're going to flush it up on the side. We're going to put 2 1.25" deck screws or outdoor ready screws, so we'll make sure you use those so they don't rust. And we're just going to go all the way down through there, spacing them about a carpenter's width pencil apart, which is just about 5/16 of an inch. So I messed up. So the pencil spacer was too much, and it left too big of a gap to try to compensate over the last 3 or 4 boards. Not a big deal. We just take all the screws out. It's fine. I'm going to use this rule. It's about an 1/8 inch thick, give or take a smidgen. A smidgen is a technical term for a little bit. So all you have to do is put that rule in there and we'll space it out. When we get to about 4 or 5 boards left, we'll look and see but I should be pretty close to space those out equally, so you'll never know it unless you watch this video. So once you get the back slats put on, you can take it out of the frame. You may notice that if everything isn't just perfect, in other words, you couldn't get all of your cuts just exactly perfect, there may be a tiny bit of difference between those boards up and down. If you want to take care of that or straighten everything up, all you have to do is lay a board up here that's longer than this and just clamp it down and then use that as a straight edge to cut the top of these all exactly the same. You can do the same thing on the bottom as well, or if you have a track saw, you can do the same thing. And that'll just line everything up nice and perfect. If you don't want to do that, then it's still fine just like this, and most people will never notice unless they get really up close and see it. It's really up to you. That just makes it look more professional. Next thing I'm gonna do is just go ahead and sand the back to 120 grit. It's gonna be much easier to do it now versus after it's installed or attached to the frame. Also sand that frame to 120 grit before we move on to the next step. If you wanna go the extra mile, these little knot holes you see that are completely encircled with opening around them, those will work loose. Matter of fact, that one is loose now, if you can see that. Those will work loose over time and then you'll have a hole there. We don't want that. We're gonna go put some medium thick Star Bond in brown because I'm gonna use a brown colored outdoor finish. All you're going to do is run a little bead of this glue all the way around that. This is going to lock that in forever. This activator makes it set up within about 30 seconds. We're going to do that on all the knot holes. We'll sand that flush and then we'll be ready to move on to the next step. Also, if you find any knot holes that have like a crack in them, you can seal those up if you want to. That just helps go the extra mile. Now it's time to attach the back. I'm going to make sure that the frame is sitting flush on the table as well as this back support upright. I'm going to drive one screw in this corner, then I'm going to square this up, and then I'm going to drive about 4 or 5 total in there, driving from the inside out. That way you don't have any screws showing on the outside of your frame. You also want to make sure you pre-drill these holes so that they don't split the wood and ruin your project. We're going to do this on both ends. The first seat slat I'm going to install is the one on the back. Now this one really isn't necessary, but to get the correct spacing, it's just easier and it'll look more finished. Now one thing you can do if you want to is notch this piece out so that this extends over. I don't really see a need for that here, but if you wanted to do that, you can. Those seat braces that are underneath, just going to take a square and mark a line right in the center of that brace so that we'll have something to screw into and we can keep those lines straight going across. From there, you'll just pre-drill and drill the holes in. You also put a few across the back just for good measure. Once we get the back seat slat set, say that 3 times fast, we're going to go ahead and cut the rest of them 53 inches, just shy of 53, give us a little play, and then we'll notch out around everything that we need notches on. For the seat slats, we're just using common 1x6. These are spruce. You can use pine or whatever you got. To get our notch around this frame, this upright, I'm just going to use this little speed square. It's a DFM square. That'll mark on each end exactly where it will notch out and slide in there. Now we need to know the distance. Pretty easy way to do that is just to measure back minus 3/8 of an inch because we're going to have a 3/8 inch gap. Looks like about 1 1/8 inches. We'll just take a jigsaw and cut those out. Now to space these seat slats out, I'm going to use 3/8 inch dowels. Now if you don't have 3/8 inch dowels, you can also use 3/8 inch drill bits or just cut some 3/8 inch shims or pieces of wood to slide in there between these boards. Once I'm happy with the fit, I'm going to sand this before I put it in because it's going to be very difficult to get back there to sand that if we don't do that now. To attach the seat slats, I'm using the same 1¼ inch screws we used on the back, and I pre-drilled and countersunk each one to prevent the wood from splitting. I'm going to set my miter saw on 35 degrees, and I'm going to cut an angle on the bottom of the legs just to give it a little something extra just so they're not just squared off legs. If you don't have a miter saw, then you can just do this with a jigsaw, whatever you got. You want to go ahead and sand these leg assemblies before we attach them. On the bottom where we cut those angles, I'm going to go ahead and round those over just a little bit with that sander so that we don't have any sharp corners. This is where we can adjust our seat height depending on how tall, who you're making this is for. We typically make ours at about 18 inches, but if you wanted to put cushions on here, then you need to take that into account as well. So from the bottom of the leg to the top of the seat, we're gonna make this 16 inches. That way we can have a good cushion on there if we so choose, and if we don't, it's still gonna be comfortable for most people. To make attaching the leg assemblies easier, I'm using some quick clamps that help hold it in place. That way I don't have to fight them while I'm trying to get everything laid out. So you're looking at about 11 3/4 from the bottom to the bottom of the rail, from the bottom of the leg to the bottom of your front apron. With that 3/4 inch piece on there, it should give you 16 inch seat height. All right, from here we have a little bit of an option on what we can do. This is the last piece, or the last seat slat. You see that it's hanging over maybe 1/4 inch on the front. If we flush mount this leg to the front, then this is what it'll look like. You could just kind of 45 that or sand that over just to give it a little more roundness. Or you could inset this about 1 inch and then we can notch out around that and it'll kind of give it a little more finished look. That's what I'm gonna do. I've marked the legs on the back side just so that I'll know where they're at. Uh-oh. Just because of that. I'm gonna use glue here because I want all the strength I can get on these legs. The main thing here is you're gonna make sure that the legs are exactly 11 3/4 from the apron on both ends. Attaching the next leg assembly should be relatively easy. We're gonna measure in 1 inch again. That way we know how far back to set our leg assembly. Then we can just set it up here, clamp it, and screw it from inside. That way you don't have to worry about holding anything up. I'm gonna make a mark at 11 3/4 just to make it easier on me. So for the front seat slat, we're going to need to notch this out so that it'll go back in there, but leave a little bit here to cover the front of that. It's just a look thing. If you wanted to inset that again, you could. So I just put a dowel in there. We're gonna slide that back until it bumps out. Then we'll just mark the front of that front leg. Do that on both ends, we'll notch it out. Using a speed square will help guide you and keep yours cut square-ish. To attach the final seat slat, I'm doing it the same way that I did the rest of them. Then I'm gonna use a sander to round over that front corner. That's gonna soften up that edge and it's gonna make it match the rest of the bench. Next thing I'm gonna do is cut out the armrests. They're gonna be about 24 1/4 inches long. I want them to stick out exactly the same length as the seat, so it all matches. And on the front 2 corners, I'm gonna round them over similar to what we did on the back slats. Before you install those handrails, you're gonna wanna sand those down at 120 grit. Make sure you hit the ends and around that corner just so you can soften up those sharp edges. You don't want nobody getting a splinter because you failed to sand the edges. There's a couple of ways you can attach these handrails. You can pocket hole up from underneath and then plug those holes, or you can just do what we've done on the rest of this bench on as far as the seat slats and the back slats and just drill and screw those in, and I think that's what we're gonna do here. I'm gonna flush it up against the back, that way the front overhangs, and then we'll drill down into there. Make sure you mark before you drill. To make this outdoor ready, I'm going to use this Cabot Australian timber oil. I spray it on with my HomeRite sprayer, very light coat. You don't wanna overdo it because it will run, it's very thin. But this is one of the best outdoor finishes I've found that takes little to no maintenance. About every couple of years, you'll need to reapply, but it holds up extremely well to the Arkansas weather. I've got a whole video on outdoor projects, how to finish them, what woods to choose. I'll link that at the end of this video, as well as that card you see popping up now. We dedicate this video in memory of Miss Rhonda Brantley Sanderland, one of my wife's best friends at school, an amazing teacher and an even better friend. We're donating this bench to the Druid Central Middle School. They're having a plaque made for it in honor of Miss Sanderland. Miss Sanderland, you will be missed greatly. Hey, I'm Matt. Today I want to show you how to build this awesome DIY modern outdoor chair. We're just going to use common yellow pine for this build. You can get it at your local home store. It's a very easy beginner woodworking project, and we're going to use pocket holes for the joinery method. A lot of you have already built the modern outdoor sectional that we did a few months ago, and this is a matching chair to that. This project only takes 5 10-foot 2x6s and 1 10-foot 1x6. I'm just using southern yellow pine for this build. I've had good luck with yellow pine and outdoor furniture if you finish it correctly, like I'll show you at the end. You can use more outdoor friendly woods, redwood, cypress, cedar, things like that if you wish. I actually had the build plans drawn up before this project. And then I built according to the plans, and I just cut everything out before I started. This made everything go so much faster. I was actually able to make this full project start to finish in about 4 hours. Once I had all my pieces cut out, I labeled them so that I wouldn't get them mixed up. You're gonna set your bit at 1.5 inches as well as the jig on 1.5 inches and start drilling pocket holes. We're gonna drill several pocket holes here. First thing we're gonna do is build the seat frame. I'm going to use Titebond 3 because Titebond 3 is better for exterior use. And I'm also using exterior grade pocket hole screws. Make sure you use a clamp when you start assembling. That'll keep everything from slipping and sliding on you. Wipe that excess glue off as you go. The main thing is on the seat frame is to keep all of the top pieces flush. That way when you put your slats on there, they don't be rocking and all that stuff. If they're close, it's okay. If you're off a tiny bit, a 1/16 or so, I don't think you'll ever notice it. But to be on the safe side, try to keep that top flat. And the reason I say that is a lot of these 2x6s that you get from the home store, they're not all 5.5 inches wide exactly. Some will be 5 3/8, some will be 5 5/8, some will be 5.5. So you may wind up with some imperfections there where they didn't line up just right. This video is brought to you by 731woodworks.com. Go check out our online store. We have easy to follow build plans with step-by-step instructions to help you make awesome projects just like this one. I put together this outdoor projects bundle for you, save you 20% versus buying them individually. Now we're going to build the leg assemblies, and one thing to keep in mind on the leg rail where the frame that we just built is going to attach, you want to drill the pocket holes kind of skewed to one side, and we're going to put those toward the bottom so that that frame covers those up. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So when we put this brace on there, make sure you turn these pocket holes that we kind of skewed to one side, flip those around so that they're closer to the bottom of the leg. That way when we put our frame on, it'll hide those pocket holes, cover them up. We won't have to worry about filling those later and you won't see them either. And also turn them in toward your seat. If you use wood glue on all your joints, especially these outdoor pieces like this, one, it's gonna make it stronger, and two, it'll keep it from squeaking later. You can use your one-of-a-kind glue spreader or whatever you got. The reason I'm using a straight edge here is you see that this piece has a little bit of that rough edge there missing. So I've just used a straight edge to make sure that my leg is lined up with the brace here. Got this leg assembly done, now we're gonna make another. These are our seat slats that we cut earlier. You want to make sure that they're going the same direction as your front board so that it all lines up right. So you should have 4 of them, and we're just going to equally space those out. Now's a good time to make sure that they're not overhanging on each side so that it prevents your legs from being attached. If you feel some overhang, you can go ahead and trim those off now. I'm using exterior grade screws here for the seat slats, and it's always a good idea to pre-drill this stuff, especially these softwoods so they don't split and bust on you. I'm sanding to 120 grit. It's best to go ahead and sand now instead of after you get everything put together because it just makes life easier. You should have 2 leg assemblies and 1 seat frame. I measured up 17 inches from the bottom so that the top of my seat will be 17 inches, and then when you add the cushion, which is usually about 1 inch thick, that gives you about an 18-inch seat height. If you're building these for shorter people, you can adjust your height here. These could be the same. You've got plenty of space there to adjust that seat height down if you want a shorter seat height. You want to make sure that the seat, this piece goes across the front, and then your slats are going to be running between the 2 legs. Remember, this is an outdoor chair. It's going to get rained on. It's going to have, it's going to be in the weather, the heat, the cold. You're not building a clock, so just get it close to your marks. About 4 screws should be good. I'm using 2 1/4 inch screws here. Make sure that you're flush on each side there. I took a 45-degree chamfer bit, slow-mo, and I went ahead and rounded over the bottoms of the feet. That keeps them from splintering later. So you can kind of start seeing the chair come together. Of course, we got to put the back on there, and it's going to look a little bit deep to you right now, like it's setting too far or too much depth there, but when we put that back on at that 10-degree angle, it's going to be awesome. You're going to cut parallel 10-degree angles on your uprights. You're only going to need 2 of these. You're going to drill pocket holes in the top of your upright. Go ahead and sand those and make your life easier. Putting the back brace on, I should have, don't be me, I should have put the pocket holes both on the inside. I accidentally drilled them the same way, so there's no way to turn that around. I'll put a little glue here where it's going to contact the armrest as well as on the bottom. And all I'm going to do is flush that up to the back here of the arm. Stop, stop, stop. Past me made a big mistake that future me is now here to correct. Now for the seat slats, I'm going to drill pocket holes, 2 in each end. And I'm going to reject this call about my car's warranty.
We got to put the back slats in. I've already put one in. This top piece has to go on there. I just used a couple of small blocks to put under this bottom piece so that it raises it up a little bit. My concern as I'm putting this together, you won't have to worry about this if you get the plans, is that the back's too high. While comfortable, I don't know if there's a cushion out there that's gonna go that high. Although you really don't even need a cushion. It's quite comfortable. I may trim the top off a little bit. This looks more proportionate like that. I think the other way, cutting off 3.5 inches, it just looked a little out of proportion. That looks better. Sometimes you just gotta wing it and kind of go with your gut and hope I'm not wrong and my wife can find a cushion for that. So because I cut those uprights, I'm gonna need to drill 2 pocket hole screws so that I can attach to the top piece. And the Maskey M2 is very versatile. As you can see here, I was able to do that. So I'm actually gonna plug these pocket holes just to keep weather out and different things like that. It's not really a huge deal if you don't have any, but it's not a bad idea. They make these plugs, they actually work really well in 2x material. Just put a little glue on the back, just stick them up in there and then it'll dry, and then you can sand it back down. You see it's a little high on one side and a little lower on the other. I messed up. So while I was goofing around, claiming to be the pocket hole king, I realized that that's crooked. And apparently my measurement was off from here to here. So I need to take this off before the glue gets too set. That's what happens when you get overconfident. We're off 3/8 of an inch probably. So what I'm gonna wind up doing is using the same pocket holes, even though I'm taking off 3/8 of an inch. That means I can't use these 2.5 inch screws. So I'll go back with 2 inch screws to kind of make up the difference. Why are you so heavy? That fixed it, so we got an even gap there now. It's just a uh-oh in my spot. So we'll make sure we use shorter screws on this side, and we'll reattach everything, re-glue, refill the pocket holes, just creating myself extra work is all we did. I took my 45-degree chamfer bit and just went around the whole entire piece. That gives it just breaks up those sharp edges. You can use a round over or you can sand it. And then I did a final sand at 120 degrees. I'm going with Cabot Australian Timber Oil. It's for decks, siding, railings, and outdoor furniture. We've used it previously on our outdoor sectional as well as our deck, and I really like this. So I just pour it in my HomeRite sprayer. This is a really good sprayer for about 100 bucks. I'm gonna spray the bottom first and then flip it over and spray the top. This stuff is really thin, so you have to kind of really go fast or it'll pull up on you. I was able to spray the whole thing in about 10 minutes. You can see where it kind of pulled up on me where I was trying to get in those cracks. I'm just going to take a paper towel and wipe this off. This actually comes off really easily, and it's basically just like wiping off excess stain. Once you do that, you should have a nice uniform look. This is where I messed up. I lined up the back with the arms, and that's not where you line it up. So what that does actually is leave 2 inches that should have been on the seat because I put this too far forward. And I'm gonna have to use Big Hoss here to correct the problem. I'm gonna have to knock the back off and move it back because I didn't follow my own written plans like a dummy. It was a big mistake on my part. Let me show you how I fix it. Why did I put it under there? This is gonna suck. Rubber mallet. Yep, ruining that blade. I need a metal blade. Hoss.
Oh, the screw's still there.
That's what's going on. That did it. That did it. I knew old Hoss would do it. So I kind of boogered up this wood. I'm gonna have to sand that a little bit and refinish it. However, if you follow the plans, that won't be an issue. So to touch it up, I'm just gonna use a paper towel, dip it in this can and just kind of wipe it on there. A lot of times this oil type finish will have, the pigment will settle in the bottom. Not sure if you can see that. So you actually see the pigment on the end of the stick there. So it's always a great idea to stir your finishes. Pocket hole king has returned. Actually, with all the mistakes I made in this build, I'm more of a pocket hole jester than I am a king. But that's all right, I had fun building it. Get after it and make some sawdust. A lot of beginners have trouble with picking outdoor woods and finishing the outdoor projects so that they last. I'm gonna answer 10 of your most common questions about building outdoor projects, what types of wood to use, what types of finish to use, how to make them last as long as possible. And if you stick around, I'll give you a power tip on how to make that outdoor furniture last a very long time. Let's go. Chris Coleman, Justin Bohannon, and Bo Champion all kind of wanted to know the same thing. What's the best outdoor finish? And there's several to choose from, and we'll go through all of them. Now, they kind of had different spins on it, like which one's going to be outside all the time. In other words, full exposure to the weather. Some wanted to know best in the covered areas versus outdoor areas. There's a few different options to choose from as far as finishes goes, depending on the look you want. My personal favorite is a penetrating wood oil, AKA mostly, you can think of it as an oil-based stain for indoor projects, but I really like Australian timber oil. It's made by Cabot and not sponsored. I've just used the product for a few years now and find it to hold up for a very long time. Take our outdoor sectional and chair build, both of those creeping up on 2 years now, and I have yet to touch them. They haven't been refinished or anything, and they still look very close to the way they did the day I finished them. And it's held up well, still repelling the water like it's supposed to. I just really like that product. With penetrating wood oils, you don't have to worry about it cracking or peeling because it gets down into the wood grain. Now you do need to think about maintaining that finish probably every 2 years, or depending on how much exposure to the weather, it may be a little more often, but any finish is going to need maintenance. There's also several other companies out there putting out products similar to this, like Osmo, General Finishes, and different ones like that. You just want to make sure you get the ones with UV protection so that it stands up longer in the sun. Spar urethane is also another option. While I don't care for spar urethane, I used it early on when I very first started woodworking. It's hard to get a really nice clean finish with it as far as no brush strokes or anything like that. And you have to put like 4 or 5 different layers on, another coat. You have to put a coat on, let it dry for several hours, put another coat on, and just build up that finish to get proper protection. And it just doesn't last very long. You're gonna have to reapply that about every year. And finally, probably one of the best outdoor finish you can use is an exterior paint. Now make sure you're using high quality exterior paints and don't cheap out here. If you buy the cheap stuff, you're gonna regret it in just a few months. And when you do paint it with exterior paint, it still requires maintenance. Make sure you keep an eye on it. Make sure it doesn't start chipping or flaking or cracking. If that happens, you're gonna need to refinish that spot just to make sure you keep that wood sealed. And the reason it's probably one of the best wood finishes for outside is because it seals in that wood. Now I made this wood bench in November of 2017, the double arrow bench. We painted it red to begin with, and then Miss 731 we wanted to change the color, and we wound up changing it to this dark blue. It held up extremely well, even outside, full sun, every day, in the elements, rain, sleet, or snow, it was just there. It held up extremely well. We sold it just a couple of weeks ago because we're changing up our deck and we're gonna build some more stuff out there, but the day I sold it, it looked just as good as the day I built it. So for applying the outdoor finish, you can spray it, you can brush it, you can rub it on if it's going to be like a stain, but I really prefer to spray it on because it gets in those gaps much easier. I like the Home Right Finish Max sprayer. Got a whole video on this, but I've used this sprayer for almost 6 years, or a little over 6 years now, and I've had zero trouble with it for about $100. It's hard to beat this sprayer. Number 2 from Joshua Villalva wanted to know what's the best food safe wood finish. If you're talking outdoors, then really I wouldn't consider any of them food safe as far as prepping food on the table. But as far as if you drop something on the table, you pick it up and eat it, most all of your finishes made for wood are going to be okay because after they're cured, they're basically inert. Now, I'm not a scientist, I'm not any of that stuff, but for the most part, everything that you're going to be using after it's dried and fully cured, you shouldn't have any issues with that. Now, the only food safe finishes are things like mineral oil, those type finishes that are not really going to hold up to outdoors, so you're not going to use those as an outdoor finish. Outdoor woodworking projects are probably my most favorite projects of all time for 2 reasons. Number 1, they were the best-selling woodworking project for our business. I made more outdoor projects for people than anything else. And you get to spend time with family outside, enjoying the great outdoors without a lot of distractions. I'd like to help you build some of those. If you go to our website, 731woodworks.com/store, check out our outdoor projects as well as many other woodworking plans. If you use the code OUTDOOR, I'll give you 20% off any project. Get out there and make some sawdust, sit outside and enjoy it. Number 3 on the list, Austin Franklin wanted to know, how do you prevent cedar from graying? And pine will do this, treated lumber will do this. How you prevent that from actually turning gray, if you want to retain that natural color, then you're going to want to use a clear finish. And those clear finishes we just talked about, the General Finishes has a clear finish, Osmo has a clear finish, Cabot also makes a finish that you can use, and there's just multitude of choices to choose from, but those finishes still need maintenance, so every year or so you're going to need to pressure wash it and then put that finish back on there and just keep it maintained. You'll keep that color. Number 4 on the list, the question I got was, can you use pressure treated lumber for your outdoor projects? Yes and no. I don't like pressure treated lumber for furniture and things like that because it splits, it cracks, it bows, it bends as it starts drying out. It's just not, in my opinion, a good choice for outdoor furniture. Also, the chemicals they use to treat pressure treated lumber are not meant for skin contact. So if somebody's wearing shorts or put their arms on an armrest that's pressure treated, it may cause some skin irritation. So I would just avoid that for most outdoor projects. One thing it is good for is decks and things like that, which is what I built my deck out of. It's all pressure treated lumber. It's held up well. There's been a couple of boards that have bowed up pretty bad that I had to replace after it was initially put down. That's just the nature of pressure treated lumber. If you must use pressure treated lumber, I just really wouldn't build it for anything people are going to be sitting on or eating on or anything like that. Number 5, Mr. Link 1 wanted to know about the ongoing maintenance of outdoor finishes. I previously touched on this, but for the most part, you can expect to every year or 2 years, you're probably going to need to maintain that finish in some way. Now, oil-based finishes like the Cabot Australian Timber Oil, I've had mine on for 2 years. It still looks good. I'm not touching it. Now, if it starts to fade, then I'll just take a pressure washer and wash the project down and then restain it. Use a cleaner. I like to mix bleach with borax and a little water. It makes a really good cleaner for your deck or outdoor wood. And once it's dry, completely dry, then you'll reapply that finish. It's really not that big of a deal. Take you about a day, maybe 2, and then you're back in business. Every 2 years, give or take. But that largely depends on the heat level, the humidity level, just your weather in your area too. The number 6 question I got was, what clear finishes work on outdoor projects? A lot of people don't want the natural color gone. They don't want to stain it. They want to leave it that natural color, especially if you use certain wood types. Again, General Finishes Outdoor Oil, Osmo UV Protection, spar urethane even, although it can amber it a little bit. Those types are perfect for that clear finish you're looking for. Number 7, Firewolf Creative wanted to know the best and the worst woods to use for outdoor projects. I touched on pressure treated lumber already, but as far as the best woods to use that's going to last the longest, hold up the best to weather, you're looking at Ipe, I-P-E is how it's spelled, teak, mahogany. Those are all great choices, although they're very expensive compared to some of the others. Cedar, cypress, and white oak are also excellent choices for outdoor projects as they just hold up better. A lot of people frown on using pine, but I've had very good luck with pine. As long as you use the proper finish, as we talked about earlier, you'll be perfectly fine with pine. How you like that? I've used it on a ton of stuff and it's held up extremely well. Pine's a very durable wood if you treat it right. One thing you don't want to use is red oak, while you can use white oak. White oak holds up very well in the weather, red oak doesn't. White oak has a substance in it called tylosis, where red oak doesn't have it. So tylosis basically seals the wood grain up so it doesn't absorb as much water. Red oak doesn't, so it pulls that stuff in like a straw. So it just absorbs more water, and I would avoid that. Number 8, what's the worst wood you can use for outdoor furniture? Again, pressure treated lumber just shouldn't be used for furniture, in my opinion. Number 9, Mr. Bill Hawk wanted to know what's the best fasteners to use for outdoors. There's some you want to avoid, which we'll touch on, but for the most part, you want to stick to stainless steel screws if you can find them, or brass fasteners work well too. Craig also makes an outdoor screw that works extremely well, has that blue coating on there, and then deck screws and things like that also have a coating to prevent them from rusting. Now what you want to avoid for outdoors are zinc coated screws. They'll rust, as well as black oxide screws, similar to what you would see in a drywall screw. Those rust extremely fast, and when they rust, you're going to lose the integrity, and they have the very high likelihood of breaking, especially if you're using it on benches and things like that that need some weight bearing. Number 10 on the list, Griffin Woodworks wanted to know the minimum spacing between the boards on tables, benches, things like that. That's a very important question because outdoor furniture goes through a ton of different environments. Sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's cold. So that expansion and contraction of the wood is more than what, say, goes on in your house. So what I like to do, especially on benches, tabletops, things like that, is leave a minimum of 1/8 inch between each board. And while most woods, even pine, softwoods, things like that will expand and contract, I don't think that anything more than 1/8 inch is necessary in most cases. Now on seat slats, I do typically leave about a 3/8 inch gap. That's really only just to help that water drain off there faster so it just doesn't sit there. But 1/8 inch is fine. It's just really up to you. But make sure you leave a little gap. for that water drainage as well as expansion and contraction. Here's a bonus tip for you. Wood glue matters on your outdoor projects. I really like Type Bond 3 for outdoor projects because if you'll notice on the label, it says waterproof exterior and interior, while Type Bond 2 says water resistant. It's really not meant for outdoor as much. You can, but the Type Bond 3 is a better choice. If you'll notice their charts, they even recommend Type Bond 3 over Type Bond 2 for exterior projects. Type Bond 3 also has a higher PSI strength, and it's just a better all-around glue for outdoor projects, cutting boards, anything that's gonna get wet. You know what time it is? Power tip time. If you want your outdoor woodworking projects to last as long as possible, especially those projects that are going to be sitting on the ground or sitting on a patio or a deck, then you need to seal that end grain of the feet that are touching the surface. One of the best things you can do is take some epoxy type glue like this from Gorilla Glue. Loctite makes some. There's several different models. I'll link the description below what I use. Put a piece of painter's tape around it and then fill it about 1/16 of an inch is all it's going to take, and let that dry. It'll take a couple of hours or so. It says 5 minutes. That's not true. It's going to take it a little bit of time to dry. Once that's fully cured, you can take that tape off, sand it down however you want, and then put finish on your project. That will help keep that water from absorbing on the ground up into the feet because of that end grain that's open right there. Seals that up. How you doing? I'm Matt. Today we're going to build this awesome DIY storage chest. You can use this inside to store blankets, quilts, toys. We're actually going to use this on our deck as a storage ottoman because my wife wanted to be able to put our covers in here and not blankets or quilts, but the kind that we cover our sectional with, our table, and a place to kick our feet up and relax a little.
Let me see Kiki put up. Did y'all see that?
It barely made it on the camera.
Very easy build, free plans available, link in the description below. Let me show you how I did it. So the first thing we gotta do is cut out the boards that's gonna make up the side and end panels. Very easy, just cut 6 1x6s 36 inches long and then 6 22.5 inches long, and that's going to make both sides of your box. Once that's done, I just lay out the holes where the pocket holes are going to do, and I just split them evenly. Going to use my Masca M2 pocket hole jig set on a 3/4 inch setting here. We're going to start drilling pocket holes, 2 per board, evenly spaced, very easy. Be sure and hit that subscribe button, click that bell icon next to it so you get notified of all of our new content. After the pocket holes, I just sanded everything to 120 grit, glue, pocket hole screws, and a face clamp to help everything stay lined up. It's all you need. Make up all 4 panels. There'll be a link in the description below to the tools and supplies I'm using in this build. When you're assembling these panels, make sure to keep both ends aligned as perfectly as you can. Also, if you don't have a jointer or anything, I didn't join any of these boards, I just factory edge to factory edge. It'll give it a little more detailed look. The only size screw you're going to need for this project is an 1¼ inch pocket hole screw. This is an extremely easy beginner woodworking project that you can do with minimal tools and minimal experience. There's free plans available, linked in the description below. Next thing we're going to do is cut out the legs. So I'm going to set my table saw at 2 3/4 of an inch and rip 4 boards 2 3/4 of an inch wide by 19 1/4 long. Then I set the table saw at 2 inches and I ripped 4 boards 2 inches wide by 19 1/4 inches long. So I actually just ripped all of these parts out of the 2 seams. So if you haven't noticed, I've been using CMT blades recently on my miter saw and table saw. If you use the code in the description below at taytools.com, you can get 10% off. These are really, really good blades. Once we have the leg parts cut out, we just use our one-of-a-kind glue spreader and some wood glue. Glue them edge to edge here. What you're going to wind up with is a 2 3/4 by 2 3/4 leg. You want to join them edge to edge. I just use pin nails to hold them while the glue dries. If you don't have a brad nailer or a pin nailer, you can just clamp these and leave them clamped until the glue is dry. We got all our sides made and our legs, and now it's time to start assembling the box. It's pretty simple, actually. So what we're going to do is I'm going to assemble it upside down. It's always easier to do that. The wider side I'm going to put to the front. This is the front of my box. And I'm just going to turn, we got it upside down. We're going to lay it on the bench so that this and this are flush on the bench. That way when you flip it over, they're flush on the top. This is also going to give it a little more detail than if we just put some legs on there that were flat against the face here. So all we're going to do is put glue in there and then brad nail it or pin nail it in place. It's just gonna hold it for the glue to dry. You're gonna spread that glue with that one-of-a-kind glue spreader you got. Once the glue is spread out pretty good, now I just clamped it on there because I wanna check and see if this is flush down here or what's gonna be the top. If that's not flush, you can adjust it now before you attach it. We've got it flush to this face and we've got it all the way against the end grain of those boards. We're just gonna attach those. You can use brad nails, finish nails. You can leave it clamped until the glue dries if that's what you wanna do. So your assembly should look something like that. I'm gonna assemble the other end, but just to show you, your side pieces will go on exactly the same way, except for they're gonna go into this groove. We're gonna clamp those down, nail those into place so that the glue dries. Now that the box is assembled, we got to build the bottom. And on mine, because it's going outside, I left gaps in there. So I just used 4 1x6s that I cut 34 5/8 inches long and then drilled 2 pocket holes on each end. Then I sanded to 120 grit. Then I just attached them flush with the bottom. After the bottom is installed, I ripped out 2-inch pieces and then cut them to fit the size that I needed to go as trim. We're going to do this on the top and the bottom all the way around. Then I just cut those, test fit them in place, and then once I figured out that I liked the way it looked, then I used glue and pin nails again to hold it in place. If you don't have a pin nailer, again, you can just clamp these until they're dry. This gives the box a whole lot more detail than just leaving it without. It's very simple to do. These are all square cuts. Next thing we're doing is cutting out the top. We're going to need 5 pieces that are 37 5/8 inches wide. Now make sure to measure your box to make sure that's accurate, but we're going to rip one of those down to a smaller strip. Drill our pocket holes, get ready to just put glue and pocket hole screws in and attach 4 of those 5 pieces together. Once you have those together, take a measurement on your box for the depth and then measure and mark that depth onto your top, and then we're going to rip that last piece out with the table saw. It should be about 3 5/8 inches wide. Once that's ripped, you're just going to attach it to the top. And for the top, I just cut some 2-inch strips and attached them to the top. Make sure you leave some space on the front and back so that it can open and close. And then I just attach those with glue and brad nails. All that's going to do is help it be a little more rigid so that the top doesn't flex and warp over time, especially since this one's going outside. They look good, ain't it? So we got everything, we got it trimmed out. Next, I got to sand all this, but first I want to go ahead and put the top on because I got to mount the top and then take it back off so we can stain it. Here's the top. I just put those extra supports under there so that it doesn't cup on us later. It's just glue and some brad nails is fine. Now let's see how she fits. Pretty good. Not perfect, but it's not a clock. It's just a storage box. You've got like, and there's like a 32nd or 16th overhang right there. It'll be fine. You wouldn't even know it if I ain't told you. And yours is gonna be the same way. So I'm gonna go ahead and mount this. We're gonna put the hinges on the back. I'll show you how to do that, and then we will sand this and get it stained and ready to go. I am gonna chamfer these edges so that they're not sharp. I may actually chamfer the inside of all of this. Yeah, I think I might. And then of course the corners, top. I like chamfering. Link in the description below to plans for this as well as all the tools and supplies used in this build. So I picked up these hinges at a local hardware store and attached them. You see me trying to figure out which way I wanted to put them. This is actually the only way they would work. So I attached those. I'd use my spring-loaded nail punch to mark the holes where they go. That way when I pre-drill my holes, the drill bit wouldn't move on me. I would actually be able to drill those holes more accurately.
Then we just attach those with the provided screws, and also attached a handle on the front to help open and close the lid. Then I use a 45-degree chamfer bit on my palm router, then routed the inside and outside edges of the whole box except for the top. I left it flat so that when you close the lid, it closes flat. Then I sanded to 120 grit, and everything is looking good so far.
Now let me show you how I'm going to stain this and make it outdoor ready. If you want to use this outdoors, it needs to be treated with something that's going to give it a little weather resistance. This is what we're going to use.
So like on our outdoor sectional build, we're using this Cabot Australian timber oil. It's in jar brown color. Then I put that in my HomeRite Finish Max sprayer and sprayed it on. You can brush this stuff on, but it's really thin, like water thin. So you're just going to spray light coats. Be careful of runs. And then what I did was spray the bottom of the box first so that I could get the underside of that trim as well as the bottom. Then I flipped it over, sprayed the inside of the box, and then all four sides. And it takes this stuff about 48 hours to dry, so make sure you check the weather. You're not gonna have any rain for a couple of days. Then we just reattach the lid using the same screw holes that we created earlier. And as Miss 731 unrolls and packs up this cover, you'll notice a little block of wood under the lid there. That was just so that the lid could dry after it was attached. Now she can kick her feet up and relax now that she's got a place to store those outdoor covers. If you haven't seen the matching sectional build, there's a link at the end of this video that takes you right to that build. It's a really cool, easy build as well.
Hey, if you like this video, click that box right there. It's going to take you to the outdoor DIY sectional build we did a few weeks ago. Clicking that box gets you a big old virtual fist bump. Thank you so much for watching.
Hey Matt, today I'm going to show you how to build this easy DIY lounge chair. You can use this on the beach, the patio, the deck, or even around the fire pit. These are so simple to make.
For this project, we're going to use 3 power tools that most everybody has. We're going to take 2 hours. We're going to make one awesome project. Let's do it. I packed up the plans and a few small tools into this tiny box to take it with me on vacation with my family to the beautiful Destin, Florida. They have white sandy beaches and crystal clear water most of the time. While I was there, I wanted to build this project, which is why I brought the tools. So I went to Home Depot. I picked out some 1x2s and some 2x4s, as well as some screws, glue, and sanding blocks. I actually bought 4 2x4s and returned 1 because I only needed 3. So I got the lumber, the wood glue, the screws, and the sanding blocks all for $63.59. But the lumber itself was just over $23. I unpacked all my tools, and you can see I only had a drill, a driver, and a circular saw, speed square, and a tape measure. First thing we're going to do is lay out everything and cut everything, and then we'll start assembling. With the plans, it makes it super fast. Let's start the timer and see if we can get it done in under 2 hours. Make sure to square up the end of your boards because they're not square from the factory. And then I just cut all my parts out with the circular saw. You can see me using the speed square here as a guide so that it helps me keep good straight cuts. Be sure and pick up your mess. I built this on the Home Depot parking lot. I didn't ask anybody. I didn't have anywhere else to work, so I decided to do it there. I figured it was better to ask for forgiveness than permission if I got caught or asked to leave, which I didn't, so thumbs up there. When cutting out the 1x2s, I cut my first one to length, and then I used those as a guide for the rest of them. Now, you're gonna have 2 different lengths on this chair, one for the seat base, one for the seat back, but I cut them out both the same way, using one as a guide. Time check, it took me just over 17 minutes to cut out all the parts to this chair. I want to take a really quick break from the video to let you know we have build plans available for this project and many others on our website, 731woodworks.com/store. And if you use the code CHAIR, I'll give you 20% off any order. Go check it out. Now, from there, I started laying out the holes I was going to pre-drill. It's best to pre-drill holes, especially in pine, because they're notorious for splitting if you just drive a screw in there without pre-drilling. I use this countersink drill bit for every bit of this project, and it was really easy to use. It made a nice little pilot hole to hide the head of the screws or to countersink them. Once it was time for assembly, I used wood glue on every joint of this project. Anytime wood touch wood, that'll make everything nice and solid. This is where I use the 2.5-inch screws is for the 2x4 frames to connect everything together, and the 1.5-inch screws we'll use on the seat slats themselves. For the seat slats, I drilled a countersink hole in the center about a 3/4 of an inch away from each end. That way everything looks nice and uniform when you put them all together. I also put a 1-inch gap in between each seat slat. While I was in the parking lot building, my wife wanted to go eat breakfast and I had the truck. So she got an Uber to a local breakfast restaurant. During the Uber ride, my wife was talking to the driver and made friends with her very quickly. Somehow I got brought up that I was making a chair in the parking lot of Home Depot, and the lady jokingly said, "I'd love to have a chair." Well, my wife said, "You can have it." For the base of the chair, I left this gap so that the back can slide in there. And speaking of the back, we're going to cut a 15-degree angle on one end of the back uprights. That's going to make it slant so that when it sets on the ground, it connects correctly. I just used my speed square for this to lay out the 15-degree angle. Then I used a circular saw and just took it slow and cut those angles out. For the 2x4 that connects the two 15-degree angle pieces, I just slanted that slightly to match that 15-degree angle and drove screws to hold it in place. This is my son you see here who was helping me with this project so that we could get it done. And he did a really good job on this thing. If you like this type of content, be sure to hit the subscribe button, click the bell icon next to it so you get notified of all the new content we've got coming. To put the back on, because I didn't have a mallet or anything like that, I just turned it upside down and it slipped right into place. And once you slip it into place, those two slats should connect and stop everything where it needs to go. From there, I just drove screws from the inside towards the outside to just basically hide those screws. But you can do it from the outside in if you wish. For the front legs, I glued and screwed the uprights together and then slipped those in place, and they should bottom out on the bottom of those seat slats. That way everything's nice and solid. Be sure to use wood glue when you connect these. Once that was assembled, I broke out those 120 grit sanding blocks and went to town. This took a little bit of time and a lot of elbow grease, but it's well worth it so you don't get any splinters and you knock down those rough edges. Be sure to hit the edges of all those boards and then also the faces of them. This chair is surprisingly light, and we were able to do it in 1 hour and 26 minutes, so woo. It is comfortable. It's a good angle. I get a lot of comments or emails or messages saying if I had that many tools or a shop full of tools, I could build that too. Well, for this project, you don't need that. This is going back to my roots, where I started with a borrowed circular saw and 2 drills. So don't let a minimal tools stop you from building awesome projects. The important thing is you gotta have some want to. You gotta want to get out there and make things with the tools that you have. Start small and you work your way up. That's how most of us did it. Today I'm going to show you how to make 5 DIY outdoor tailgating or party games. I'll show you how to make classic cornhole boards. Very easy, very simple to do, but a lot of fun. Next, I'll show you how to make this giant 4-in-a-row game. After that, we'll make ladder toss or ladder golf, as some people call it. And then we'll do a washer toss game, and then also 7-3-1 Pong that my wife came up with. Let me show you how we did it. The first thing we got to do to build these cornhole boards is to break down this plywood. I'm just using a straight edge and a circular saw, so I'm just cutting 2-foot strips out of this plywood. We have plans available to all of these games linked in the description below. Next thing we got to do is mark the holes for the cornhole board. I measure down 9 inches and then of course right in the center at 12 inches. Mark that hole. And I use a center punch here so that my drill bit doesn't move on me. Drill a pilot hole, then use this beast of a 6-inch hole saw made specifically for cornhole boards actually. Be careful because this thing will hurt you. If you're not careful, it will twist your arm bad. So the next thing we're going to do is cut the frames for the cornhole boards. We're making 2 cornhole boards, so we're going to have 4 pieces that are 48 inches long and 4 pieces that are 21 inches long. This is just common 2x4. You know what time it is. Power tip time. Make sure before you cut the new board, you don't want to just, this is a new board, never been cut from the store. This end needs to be squared up before you use it, because if you can see that right there, it is fairly out of square from the lumber yard. It's probably a good 64th out, maybe a 32nd out of square. So you want to go ahead and cut this end off and make it square before you take your measurement and cut your first piece. So to join all these boards together, I'm just going to use pocket holes because they're extremely strong and durable, and I like them. I like them a lot. This is the Masca twin pocket hole jig kit. This will come with everything you need to drill the pocket holes. If you don't have a pocket hole system, then pick up some 2.5-inch screws as well. This will be a very inexpensive way for you to get started. So I showed you the Masca twin pocket hole jig because it's very inexpensive and easy to get started. However, I prefer the Masca M2 pocket hole jig because it's a little more versatile and a lot easier to use, especially when you're drilling multiple pocket holes. Now it's time to assemble the frame. I'm just using Titebond 2 wood glue. Use your one-of-a-kind glue spreader there. Spread that glue out. Used a clamp just to hold everything nice and snug while I drive these pocket hole screws. I'm going to use 2.5-inch pocket hole screws here since you're using 2x4s. The next thing we got to do is to cut our legs out. I'm going to cut these just a little over 12 inches long, and I'm going to mark this hole down about 2.5 inches, and then I'm going to mark center and use a center punch so that my drill bit doesn't walk on me. And then from that center hole, I'm going to use a compass to draw the radius of the circle. If you don't have a compass, just use a cup or whatever you've got. Then I just use a 3/8 inch drill bit and drill the hole. So I use the jigsaw to cut the curve, and then I just use my orbital sander to clean those cuts up. And while we're sanding, I just use 120 grit to sand everything. Also used a little elbow grease right here for the circles. Then I drilled the 3/8 inch holes using the same bit through the frame, using the legs as a guide. And the top of the board, I just use a 45-degree chamfer bit just to break the edge so it's not just sharp and square. There's a real easy way to get that angle. Super simple, let me show you. I measure up 12 inches from the top side or the face of the plywood up to there. To get the angle exactly right every single time, I just use a 4-foot level. Use the bottom of the level down there, the bottom of the level here, hold it on that 12-inch mark and draw a line. That's gonna give you your angle. Should be about between 13 and 15 degrees. Now we just take them off, take it on the miter saw and cut that line. They should be exact. Bada bing, bada boom. Look at that, perfect 12 inches. Yep. I should have painted the whole thing together, but I didn't because I had a different idea I was going to do. But essentially, you can just go ahead and assemble the frame and paint the whole thing at one time if you want. I just use glue and some pin nails to hold it while the glue dries. That's what the final product's going to be. I'm going to show you how we did this custom paint job in just a minute. The next game is this awesome ladder toss game. You're just going to cut 36-inch pieces. You're going to need 4 of those, and you're going to need 10 5-inch pieces to make the base. Once those are made, you're going to sand those up, and then we're going to assemble them. It's probably one of the easier ones you're going to be able to build, and I want to make this portable, so I want it to come apart so we can pack it up and take it with us to the tailgate, or we can take it to the family reunion or to the party or whatever we need to do. So you've got your 2 36-inch pieces, you've got your spacer blocks, then you have your riser where the dowels are going to go for your ladder. I've got center on this board marked, I've got center of this board marked, and we're just going to line those up. You can move your spacer blocks in, we're going to glue it and then put a couple brad nails in there to hold it till the glue dries. So if you have pieces you're gluing together, this is a pretty old trick a lot of people know. Just take a little bit of salt, regular table salt, because when we try to clamp this together, everything's going to start moving and slicking and sliding because all of these pieces are pretty slick. So we're just going to take a little bit of salt, add on this side, a little bit of salt on this side, and do that all the way, and that'll keep everything from moving. It basically gives it something to grip to. Don't leave this in here until it dries, because if any glue squeezes out and gets on this board, it's going to be stuck. So go ahead and take that out while the glue dries. I did leave just a little bit of a gap, maybe not even a 64th or a 32nd there, just so we got wood expansion and contraction. We want it won't get like lodged in there if it's real humid out or something like that.
And I just cut some 45-degree angles on each end just so that they're not square. Just gives it a little more detail. Next, I use an 1.25 inch Forstner bit and drill down about a 1/2 inch, and I drill 3 of these in each upright. This is 1.25 inch dowel rod. You can get this at your home store. It's actually made for closets to hang clothes on, so it's very readily available. I'm gonna cut those in 25-inch lengths. Put plenty of glue here in the holes you just drilled. They're not all the way through, they're just 1/2 inch deep. And then you're gonna inset those dowels into that, clamp those in place and let that dry. Next, it's time to make the washer toss. And yep, I said washer. You're gonna rip these down into 14-inch squares. You're gonna need 2 14-inch squares. Then I cut 4-inch strips out so that I could make the sides, and then I cut them to length here. Use a 1/2 inch setting on my Masca M2 pocket hole jig because it's a 1/2 inch plywood. Drill 2 pocket holes on each side of the 14-inch square. Then I just use 1-inch pocket hole screws to attach the sides. Then I just use some brad nails to hold the corners in place while the glue dries. Once that's done, I use 4-inch PVC pipe, cut it 3.5 inches or long. So once you measure, get it in the center, you'll mark a line and then put some clear CA glue, the activator, mash it in place and it'll be there. It sticks really well. Just use your little bit of sandpaper to knock off that sharp edge. Then I just used the orbital sander, 120 grit sandpaper, and sanded everything. And then we put this pretty cool looking paint job on both of these. Next, it's time for the Pong game. Now this one I made a little different because I used 3/4 inch plywood because it's what I had available. I cut a 15-inch square on this one and then ripped down strips into 4¼ inches wide. Use a similar process using a Masca M2 pocket hole jig, but this time on a 3/4 inch setting because it's 3/4 inch material, 2 pocket holes on each side, and then we attach the side using glue and 1¼ inch pocket hole screw. So we're cutting this PVC pipe into equal sizes, 3.5 inches long. This stuff makes a mess when you're cutting it. I just make sure to mark the center one just like we did before, clear CA glue, use that activator so that it sticks instantly, and then I just equally space the 4 outside pieces of PVC pipe. The rules for 7-3-1 Pong are pretty simple. These are foam golf balls, link in the description to these. So you throw it from a distance, 15 feet. If you land in the center, that's 7 points. Either one of the top is 3, and then the bottom is 1, 7-3-1. Check that paint job out. Let me show you how we did that. First, we got to build this awesome 4-in-a-row game. First thing you want to do is just rip a 24-inch strip out of the plywood, and then from there you're going to rip so that your final width is 41 inches by 24 inches tall. And now it's time to lay out all of these holes. There's like 35 of these holes you're going to have to drill. So it's going to take you a little time, so take your time, lay these out. I've got plans available, link in the description below if you want to lay this out just like this. I use a straight edge to mark these holes. Then from there, I just take a small drill bit to drill pilot holes so that the bigger bit has something to guide it. I clamp both pieces of plywood together. This is just 1/4 inch plywood, and drill the holes at the same time so that they line up exactly. Now your drill will hate you when you're done. It will hate you. It gets so hot.
That thing is so hot I can't hardly hold it. It did not like that.
Once that's done, the worst part of the whole project is actually sanding the inside of these holes. I just used 120 grit sandpaper and it took me a while to do that. Next, we rip the strips down so that we're able to assemble this. So now it's time to assemble this. These are 1.5 inch strips. We're gonna glue those on. I'm going to actually use some CA glue to kind of temporarily stick them, but also use wood glue that'll take a little longer to dry. But the CA glue will help get everything stuck in place. And the reason I'm doing that is because especially these 1/2 by 1/2s, they tend to be twisted or bowed a little. So if it's bowed, then you're gonna wanna tack this down straight. And it's gonna need to be straight. Should be a 1/2 inch between the hole and the edge of this piece on each row. This piece goes flush against the side. And this is just Star Bond medium thick clear. Just gonna put a couple of dabs down through there. And we'll spray the activator on this side. What the activator does is it basically makes it almost an instant set. To put the second piece on, we're not going to use CA glue because it's not needed here. We're going to just weight it down so that everything dries. We'll have time to do that while we work on the legs and the base. What you want to do is you go ahead and put your wood glue on. This is going to give you plenty of time to get everything lined up. Now it's time to start on the frame and the legs. It's going to hold this 4-in-a-row game up. Again, I'm using a Mamasca M2 pocket hole jig to drill pocket holes in the uprights of the legs, and then we'll attach those using a face clamp and 1.25 inch screws into the cross member of the leg. And you're just going to measure this, make sure it's about center, and then drive those screws in. That'll hold it. And to get these pieces, I just ripped a 1x6 in half. Next, I'm gonna cut 45-degree angles on some shorter pieces for bracing, and I use pocket holes to do the same thing with these. Drill the pocket holes and then attach them with the 1.25 inch pocket hole screws. Once the leg assemblies are attached, just put glue on there and then clamp them in place and use brad nails to attach them. When the glue dries, that's all you'll need. All right, so we know that once you get the disc in there and you won the game and you're celebrating and victorious and you want to start over, you're gonna have to figure out a way to dump these. I've just cut a couple of small pieces. We're gonna use a 3/4 inch spacer because I'm gonna cut a little strip of 3/4 inch, 2 or 3 inches wide, so we can actually move in and out. Once that's done, I need a bottom tray to actually hold the playing disc that you're gonna use as a 4-in-a-row. So I just use a 1x6 here, drill pocket holes in each end and then 4 on each side. I use the ones on each end to attach to the legs. Then I rip 2 smaller strips and attach them to the side just so that it would hold those discs in without them falling out. Basically, you're just making a bottom tray. Next, we got to cut out all the disc, and this is a 5-inch hole saw. This was going to take some time cutting those 5-inch discs out of 1/2-inch plywood. I cut 3 or 4 at a time, and then I would sand the 3 or 4 while my drill cooled down because it doesn't like this. It's going to hate you again. You need about 36 of these. First thing I got to do is spray primer on all of this. I used just a good primer from Sherwin-Williams. Sprayed all of it. So we had 3 different colors where we were painting: red, white, and blue. So what I did was I just painted everything that was going to be red first, and then everything that was going to be blue, and then everything that was going to be white, so that I didn't have to clean them and come back. And I just used my Home Right Finish Max sprayer for this. We bought all of our paint at Sherwin-Williams. Then the colors are 6524 Commodore Blue, 2839 Roy Koff Copper Red, the old trusty 6112 Biscuit White. Then Miss 731 brought her design skills into the game and she started taping this off using frog tape so that she could put her spin on it. She had an idea in her mind that what she wanted to do, so we just let her go. First thing we did was just use that Biscuit White and painted a white V on this board. You can see that frog tape works really well. Now, there's a couple of places where it bled through just a little bit, but it's very, very, very little. We also put some red stripes on there, tie in the flag theme. Did the same thing on the red board, used that same frog tape, and then she freehanded taped a star. This is like genius level to me, because there's no way I could have ever done this. I thought this come out fantastic. Once she got the star taped on there, she used a razor knife and just cut out the inside of the star so that we could paint. In hindsight, we should have painted the V blue and then come back and painted the star white after the blue dried, but this worked out because once we painted the star white, we took the tape off and then we retaped and then painted blue, making sure not to get inside that white star. That actually gave some really crisp, clean lines on the star. That is such a satisfying process removing the tape and seeing that clean line. Check those out, it's fantastic. Now for the special paint job, after we got a biscuit white coat on this, we just slung paint on there. That was super fun, and it actually looked really cool on that white. The way everything kind of tied in with the red, white, and blue, we did that on everything except for the cornhole boards. If you like the American red, white, and blue theme we've got, I'll put a link in the description below to all these products. You got to check out my greatest tips and tricks video right there. Everything I know. I crammed it into that video. Click that box, get you the big old virtual fist bump.